Hey folks, welcome to Module 1. And this is our introductory video, and also it's the lecture overview. And so what I'll do is I'll walk through now the important components of the module, and I'll also give you what I think are the important components of actually the lecture material. And so first thing I want to do is just give you an overview and an organization, sort of a roadmap on how to go through the module. So if you look at the module itself, I've tried to structure it where there are activities that you'll be reading, there's things that you'll watch, videos, there's also PowerPoint slides for your reference, there are tools on the web, there's some journal references, and there's also some more popular publications and information that I want you to look at. And then there's a discussion post, and then there's a written assignment. And then there's a closing video that I'll have you watch that'll be quick. And then there's a checklist for you to complete that you've gone through all the different items in the module. So I want to remind you that all those items are important and part of the course. And so please take advantage of all of them because they're all absolutely critically important for you. I want to make sure also that you take time and really focus on the discussion modules and the written assignment, that you don't just blow those off or just try to do them at the last minute, because that's the way that you're going to really begin to take the information that you're learning and then synthesize it and apply it into to your work life. And so the focus I want now is on the textbook, on Ginter Chapter 1. And the first chapter has a list of modules, I think, objectives, I'm sorry. There's 9 of them in the chapter. And what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to focus on those objectives that are highlighted. Those are highlighted in the module, or in the module within in the read section under the module intro and the objectives. I've typed up a narrative there for you to read, and there's also a list of the modules that I think are important. It's 1, 3, 4, 7, 8, and those are highlighted for you. So really, as you go through the materials and as you work through the module, you want to focus on those key objectives. Not that they all aren't important, but those are the critical modules. And I think when I look at this, the whole idea around the topic that we're going to jump into, which is called strategic planning in the course outline. But really, it's bigger than strategic planning. It's really around strategic management. And I love the way that Ginter approaches this. I love his model around strategic management, which is a component of that is strategic planning. But I think as you broaden your perspective during our course and think about strategic management versus just strategic planning, I think you'll get a tremendous amount out of the course that you're going to be studying. So focus again on strategic management. And really, when you think about healthcare and the industry that all of us are in, it's a tremendously dynamic and complex industry filled with change, filled with complexity. You can see all of that, whether you're a payer, a provider, a patient, one of the stakeholders around the ecosystem that supplies the healthcare system is awfully complex. And it's a significant part of our economy. 20-25% of the GNP is attributed to healthcare. And so it has a tremendous impact on all of our lives daily and on those of us who work in healthcare on a daily, day-by-day basis in the work that we do every single day. And so not only is it complex, but there's tremendous amount of change. And strategic management, the whole idea and the model that we'll be studying around strategic management really gives us a way to systematically assess and monitor and respond to changes. Changes that can occur both within the organization and outside of the organization. Primarily, you're focusing on outside of the organization, but also cannot look at those in a vacuum because they are very interdependent. And so strategic management is really a function, and it's a fundamental leadership skill and a fundamental leadership function that all of us should be in have within our toolbox of understanding concepts around strategic management. And basically the text does a great job of highlighting Ginter's model of strategic management, which really has 3 components. It has a component around something that he calls strategic thinking, which I think is really very excellent. He has another area called strategic planning, and then he has an area called strategic momentum. And it uses a comparison in the text between a map and a compass. I focus on that. It's really important to understand how the map is a more analytical, more linear process, where a compass is more directional and more long-term thinking, and how do you get to where you're going, versus, we need to get from point A to point B. Both of those models of thinking are absolutely critical, but he does a really nice job explaining the difference between those two items and how they relate to the strategic management process. So spend some time thinking about that and looking at that, and even looking at your own way of thinking and how you approach problem solving at work, how you approach problems that are presented to you. Do you, as a thinker, in general, react to things as a sort of an analytical approach, or do you have more of the compass view, of the long-term view, the more strategic view? And it's good for us to be clear on what our own sort of pre-wiring is and what direction, so we can make sure that we don't get bent into those particular tracks to always think about things the same way. If we're linear thinkers, then we want to make sure we're always pushing ourselves to think strategically, or to make sure we have people around us who are strategic thinkers. And the same thing if we're super high level strategy thinkers and leaders, we want to make sure that if we function best in an environment where we think strategically, we've got to have people around us who can really help us to implement, who can operationalize the dreams and the vision and sort of the compass view of where we see things heading. And so strategic thinking is a key component of strategic management, strategic planning, and then a third area, and we'll go through these in more detail, is the idea around strategic momentum. So when you think about strategic thinking, there's really 6 different areas. It's around awareness, it's around anticipation of outcomes, of seeing what results are, it's around analysis of those results, it's around interpreting those results, synthesizing that information, and then reflecting on it and making decisions on that information. And this, again, as I mentioned, is central to the role of the leader. Strategic thinking is critical whenever you're managing an area of responsibility, even when you're really managing yourself, from my view. Strategic thinking, it really acknowledges the reality of change, that things do change. It looks at what are the assumptions that are currently in place, what are the things that we're doing right now, and we question those. Is this really the right thing for us to be doing? It looks at how things interrelate. And so when you're strategically thinking about either people or processes or technology, you're thinking about how all of those different components function together. The whole idea around systems theory, which you probably were exposed to somewhere in your academic career, is something I hope all of you really begin to learn more and more about, because it's so important, especially when you work in a large organization, to understand the interdependency of all components in the ecosystem. And so you oftentimes see the example of that. When one domino falls, it causes a cascading effect, and people will say that a butterfly will flap its wings in Africa, and you'll have a hurricane on the other side of the globe. And so everything is so interrelated. Matter and energy, individuals, thinking, structures, technology, countries, cities, economies are all very interdependent. And so strategic thinking always looks at all of the components of any focus that you may be centered upon. Strategic thinking looks at the possible futures, how things could be, how things may be. What are the potential outcomes of certain things? Strategic thinking generates new ideas. And then it also considers the organizational fit within the external environment. So how does the organization really interact with, from a systems perspective, with the external environment? And again, strategic thinking is everyone's job. All of you, I want to encourage you to begin to really think strategically, and then consider how your new ways of thinking about things, how scalable things are, how you would scale them, how they interact, I'm hoping that you'll reinvent actually how you approach problems and how you come to conclusions around issues that you see in your work. The second component of strategic management is strategic planning. And strategic planning, which is really the title of the course is on strategic planning, but again, we're approaching it from a broader strategic management perspective, where planning is one component of the strategic management process. But the strategic planning process is more of the process that's used for creating a strategy. And so strategic planning, it's periodic. It involves a group of individuals coming together and brainstorming and strategizing on where they see an entity, organization, company going. It needs data. You need to have information. And it uses principles of group therapy or group consensus, not therapy, but group interaction and group dynamics, consensus and group judgment, and taking this best practices and the strengths of the team. And it also helps strategic planning to help the organization develop its focus, and it helps to allow the organization to formalize itself around decision making. If in the strategic planning process you identify there's 3 goals, this is all that we're going to do. There's 10 things that we probably could or should do, but we can only do 3. So we're able to outline those 10. We're able to prioritize those 10 into 3, and then we're able to take and drive all of our decision making around all of our resources, all of our energy. And we talked about briefly as one of the components of strategic management, something called strategic momentum. We're taking all of our strategic momentum and applying it towards perhaps those top 3 initiatives that our strategic planning process has determined are absolutely the most critical. And so coming to decision making, incorporating the consensus of a group, looking at data, going through a step-by-step process is really are all components of the strategic planning process. And when you think about the items that are considered within strategic planning, you're going to be looking at the external environment. You're going to be doing an analysis of what's happening in that space. Our next chapter in the textbook, chapter 2, module 2, is on external analysis. And then chapter 3 is on the service area competitor analysis, because in your strategic planning efforts, you always want to be focusing on what is occurring in the marketplace. Because remember, healthcare, extremely complex, a tremendous amount of change, tremendous number of stakeholders, and we have to apply the principles in healthcare and in healthcare organizations that other organizations are utilizing, so that we also within our healthcare organizations can be successful. And so within strategic planning, you're going to be doing internal and external analysis of different situations. For example, right now with the COVID virus that we're all experiencing, you're going to be wanting to do or whatever it is in the current state, it's looking at the situation and doing an analysis of that and how that impacts our plan and our strategies and our focus, and then looking at directionally where we headed, so that we have strategies to get us to the long-term goal. And so the other piece that's involved within strategic planning is to ensure that we're also planning around the implementation of anything that we decide that we're going to do. There's always considerations around how are you going to implement, how are you going to deliver, how are you going to support the delivery, what are the action plans, resources that are needed so that the plans that are established in your strategic management process under the strategic planning umbrella can be executed in a way that really makes sense. The third component of the strategic management process is something that is called strategic momentum. And the way that strategic momentum plays into the management process is really, this is the vertical component of the 3-pronged approach or the model that really looks at managing the strategy. And so the day-to-day management of, are we actually implementing and executing and delivering on the strategic goals? And so there's tremendous amount of energy that needs to go into looking at and managing the business on a day-to-day business, because every single thing that we do in an organization should be directed from the frontline person all the way up to the senior most executive. All of us should be aligned around um, having a single focus. And so that single focus creates this momentum that really drives us to really uh, manage the operation, direct the operation, create the culture, the energy, the performance monitoring tools, the processes around training and learning and staff education that push the entire organization into the direction to achieve the goals that are set in the strategic planning process. And so those are the three sort of the three buckets around the model that I want you to be thinking about under strategic management. You have the strategic thinking component, which is absolutely important, and then it's an individual, or the way that you think about things. There's a strategic planning process, which is really more of the group's responsibility to set direction for the strategy, for the organization based on data information. And then there's the strategic momentum component, which is really the day-to-day monitoring, the evaluation of our outcomes, the operational considerations, the cultural components in an organization to achieve the strategy, the learning process, and continually pushing and implementing additional strategic thinking around the results of that analysis and monitoring, scheduling and coordinating additional strategic planning activities to revisit the plan and to fine-tune the plan based on sort of a situational analysis if things are changing, as they will. And all three of these components are absolutely critical. There's a great graphic in the textbook and also in your PowerPoint slides that really outlines the components of the strategic management process. When you think about strategic management and what are the benefits of it, it really is a way to think about how do we run our organizations and how do we move our organizations and how do we take the organization from where it is today to where it needs to be in the future. So really it's a way of managing your business. It's a way that when you have followed the process and you've come up with significant structure around your planning process and clear goals and deliverables, that you can enhance communication in the organization both vertically up and down so that every single employee, regardless of their level, knows what the goals are for the organization. And then each area within the organization is able to align and to rally their troops around that strategic momentum concept to achieve those goals. It encourages innovation and change. And so when you, under the strategic momentum sort of activities, are constantly monitoring your environment, your performance, how you're achieving your targets, you can respond to change and you can be ready to continually improve, and you can then enjoy the success of hitting the milestones and the metrics that you need to hit so that you can be a successful organization. Some research shows that when you implement these tools that you have a better bottom line. The piece that I also want you to take away from the readings and the PowerPoint slides is really this whole idea around the systems perspective and how to think around a systems model. And so that's a key component of strategic management. And when you're thinking as a systems thinker, you want to remember to consider all the stakeholders who are impacted. You want to think about what are the impacts that are going to be experienced from a goal or from a strategy around people, technology. You want to think about the communication impacts and keep in mind that nothing ever occurs in a vacuum. Within organizational life, everything that occurs impacts something else. And so when you take this and as we sort of land the plane around this topic, really this is a key tool for leaders to be strategic management thinkers, that setting strategy for the corporation and really for your individual unit is key. And aligning those strategies, regardless of whether you're at the corporate level, you're at the divisional level, or at the department level, or even for your own personal brand and goal setting, is that you're thinking about things from a strategic management perspective. And so remember that, strategic management is complex and difficult. You don't just fall into it. You have to practice it. You have to refine your skills. Um, but it does give you the model, a approach that's logical, and that is a starting point to help you to begin to think strategically, begin to do strategic planning, and then to begin to build strategic momentum within the organization. And so I think it's important that you understand the framework. And as you do, it's not just a model that's an academic exercise. It really does have real world impacts that you can apply in your day to day work life. And so that's the overview of the module, my thoughts that I wanted to share with you. I want to encourage you to do the discussion post. Those we'd like to see between 300 and 600 words, so a paragraph or two, and to respond to one of your peers. And then I'll look forward to seeing your written assignments that you submit. All assignments are due. The posts, the student posts that you make, your initial post is due Thursday at 11:59. Then your peer response is due on Monday morning at 7:59. So Thursday midnight, Monday morning 8 a.m. have your posts completed, and then your written assignments are due on Monday morning at 7:59 before the next module opens up. If you have any questions, you guys know where to find me. It's always great being together. Enjoy the module. And